Hey guys, it's Graham. Welcome back to Trucker Man Reads. I've had this video on deck for a long time and I'm excited to finally get to it. If you're also a subscriber to my Substack, you saw the installments as I did a deep dive of this story earlier this year. I wrote 7 in all. I'm not going to read them all verbatim here for you, but I've got a quick summary of them written up on my laptop. I've just been really passionate about this book and I've wanted to do this for a while. Now that I finally got the time, here it is. The book is Witchy by DJ Butler. First in a trilogy and the first of 2 trilogies. Second trilogy, we'll talk about that one later. Right now, I just want to talk about this first one. It came out in 2017. I read it 4 times. It is an immensely dense book. It is, in some ways, challenging. But of all the authors that have ever attempted to, we'll say, claim the mantle of the American Tolkien, not only has this book flown under the radar, but I think DJ Butler has made the strongest case for it in terms of concept, execution, and the void that it fills in our cultural mythos. It's substantial in size. There's a fictional map there. We'll talk more about how that all came together. It's 550 pages, 200,000 words, and well, let me read you what I got here. I'm going to step off to the side. I'm going to throw that great Dan Dos Santos cover art right up there, so you guys can watch that for the rest of the video. Here is what we've got. The story is about Sarah Calhoun, a feisty Appalachian teen with a history that she doesn't fully understand. She's the adoptive daughter of a Tennessee elector. More on that in a minute. It's a political position. It's very powerful in this world. Right in the first few chapters, we find out that she's secretly the eldest of 3 children with a divine and magical inheritance on deck. The story is about her learning who her family really is and what responsibilities have fallen on her. The family that adopted her, they're veterans of a war from the late 1700s, and she doesn't know everything about her biological parents, and this is the story of her discovery of that. Alongside Sarah on this journey of discovery is Calvin Calhoun, who originally thinks that he originally thinks that he's her nephew through complicated adoptive relations, but they're actually close to the same age, and he soon finds out that they're not biologically related at all. And through an accident of magic, he gets a love spell cast on him, and he falls in love with Sarah, and the rest of his story is about him trying to come to grips with that and separate actual feelings from the magic and so on and so forth. Calvin and Sarah, in the early part of the book, are accompanied by a monk named Thalines, who knew and served with Sarah's father in the military back in the day. And much of the exposition about her backstory and the timeline and all that comes through this character. Another perspective character that we get away from Sarah in Appalachia is a man named Captain Sir William Johnston Lee, a nobleman from Virginia. His nickname in New Orleans is Bad Bill or Mauvais Guillaume, depending on who you ask. He's in exile. He's got a huge debt to pay, and because he's bad with money and doesn't understand interest, he's been in exile for 20 years and he still hasn't been able to pay all of his debt off. Being a gentleman, he's just unfamiliar with these things. Like Thalines, Bill also knew Sarah's father, and he was in charge of hiding her brother after he was born. There were, like I said, there were 3 kids. All 3 of them were hidden. Bill hid the brother, Thalines hid Sarah, and then somebody else hid the other sister. Now that the events of the first book are in motion, Bad Bill decides to get the heck out of New Orleans and track down Thalines and the other co-conspirators and find Sarah and get her to safety, since he knows the true story. And our other main viewpoint characters are the Right Reverend Father Ezekiel Angleton. He's an antagonist. He's a new light preacher. There are different religious and biblical sects here. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but you can kind of think of them as Orthodox or Catholic versus Protestant, older religion versus newer religion. Angleton is the new light preacher. He's competing with other religious leaders for converts, and his henchman is a guy named Obadiah Dogsbody. The names will at least stick in your head with this series. Angleton also knows who Sarah Calhoun really is, and he wants to capture her, and he sends Obadiah Dogsbody to do the heavy lifting. The conflict that's underway is equally spiritual, political, and martial, based on various interpretations of biblical texts over the centuries. There are certain editions of the 5 books of Moses that can be read to imply that Adam had a wife before Eve in the Garden of Eden, and through that wife he spawned different lines of heirs before and after the fall. Claiming the right to rule in Eden is a matter of lineage, and so we're trying to figure out who can properly claim that crown and throne. Why does that matter? Well, because according to the lore of the Witchy world, Eden, for our purposes, is in North America, in Appalachia, near Cahokia, in the heartland of what is the modern-day United States. The original 13 colonies are still intact in this storyline, but the lay of the land is different. The United States never came into being. We learned that George Washington and the other revolutionary upstarts were paid off, and so the Revolutionary War never happened. Our country, as we know it, was never founded. We're in an America ruled by an emperor who gets to rule by the consent of the 13 electors. That's that office I mentioned before. One of those electors is Andrew Calhoun, who is Sarah's adoptive father. She learns that her real father, who was named Kyrese Eleutherius Penn, it's a mouthful for you, he was married to Mad Hannah Penn, the wife of the emperor, Kyrese Eleutherius. See, I'm already getting the names mixed up. He was married to Mad Hannah Penn, who was also married to the emperor, and through Kyrese Eleutherius and Mad Hannah, Sarah has a brother and sister. She has to face a new responsibility as a member of the imperial family, as well as the heiress to her mother's kingdom, which is older and tied to the Amerindian lines. So new power, old power. She's a daughter of both. She can claim both ostensibly, but there's some stuff to do before she can get there. As for the time, this is set in the year 1815. The political landscape looks different from our history, but several movements are the same, not least of which is the spirit of religious upheaval and the aggressive expansion of several different sects, mingled with local lore and superstition, whether it's rural Appalachia or Native American in origin. Fragments of old world empires have also found their footing, and European influence still has a role to play. You get a lot of English, a lot of French. For the most part, though, you've got the empire under Thomas Penn, covered by the Atlantic on the east and Louisiana on the west. So this new American empire, you get the ocean, and then you got the French part of that new empire on the other side. As to why this is all happening, in a sense, it's following the natural rhythm of society over the course of human history. There's peace, then there's conflict, then there's all-out war. This is the meaning of an oft-echoed song in the book that contrasts a fictional Peter Plowshare with his nemesis, Simon Sword. You know, that biblical passage about beating your plowshares into swords and vice versa. These are all poetic descriptions of war and peace. We're in the part of the process of this war cycle where Simon Sword is waking up and he's starting to undo Peter Plowshare's hard work. Peace is coming undone. War is coming around the corner. War always wipes out the gains of the peaceful worker. So all of that said, now that we're 8 minutes into this beast, here's a very quick summary of what happens in Witchy. So Sarah and Calvin Calhoun, they're both in their mid-teens. He's technically her nephew. They head to a Nashville fair with their harvest of tobacco leaves to sell. That's where they run afoul of Ezekiel Angleton. He's a priest under the order of Saint Martin Luther. This is an unpopular denomination amongst the Appalachians. Sarah heckles Angleton when she recognizes what he is. Sarah also meets Thalanies, the traveling monk. And so he recognizes her for what she is, blah, blah, blah. There's some immediate beef that gets thrown down. Angleton sets up a sermon tent at this fair where Sarah and her family are there to sell tobacco. Sarah sabotages his sermon, and the Reverend tries to curse her, and there's beef going on between, like I said, the old preaching style versus the new light style, and she ends up having a standoff with Angleton, and he quickly surmises her identity. But Thalanies, who was watching all of this happen from the periphery, decides to intervene and help out. In chapter 2, we take a quick jaunt down to Louisiana. We get introduced to Bad Bill. Like I said, he's a swordsman for hire, and he's at least able to pay off the interest on his debts, his various debts, because in addition to the exile that he's got in Virginia, he's also accruing debts in Louisiana. Like I said, he's bad with money. He gets hired to kill somebody. He ignores a spiritual prompting not to kill the guy that he's in conflict with, and it turns out that he kills somebody very important. So now he's at least got some initiative to be on the run. In chapter 3, we go back to Tennessee. We check on that beef that was going on at the fair. Thalanies is basically able to get Sarah under his wing and get her to safety, whereas Angleton sends his henchman Obadiah Dogsbody, third time's a charm, to chase her down. Thalanies tells Sarah about her parentage. She at first is reluctant to tell what she does know, but he gets the true story to her, and they go back to the Calhoun Mountain. They meet Andy Sr. There's also an Andy Jr. in addition to Calvin. Like I said, this book has a big roster of characters, and the more you read it, the more it'll kind of solidify in your head. It's one more thing that makes this comparable to Middle Earth, to make it kind of an American Tolkien treatment of our history and our lore. There's a huge roster of characters, and the more you read it, the more it'll solidify in your head. Iron Andy, that's Andy Sr., he tells Calvin the true story. He's like, yeah, I adopted her. She's not your blood, but she's got to go on a quest now, and you've got to help her. Sarah is eventually captured by Obadiah Dog's body, but she's able to use some hexing magic that she knows to escape. But she does so by basically casting a love charm on him, and that's where Calvin Calhoun accidentally catches some of that love charm as well. And so she's got to carefully manage his affections for the rest of the story. Back in Louisiana in chapter 6, Bad Bill's luck goes from bad to worse. He shows up to get paid for the duel that he just participated in, only to get double crossed. He survives the double crossing, but then he encounters a pair of beast kind. These are weird human animal hybrids, and they descend from Eldritch and Cahokian magic. They warn him of a pending conflict on a large scale. He has a connection to that conflict through his friendship and service to Kyrese Eleutherius. But before they can tell him more, he passes out from his injuries, and they take him to get help. In chapter 7, we get a mix of action and lore dumping. This one is all really good. Angleton, the Reverend, he has dreams about catching Sarah, and since he's both religious and a student of magic, he puts a lot of stock in those dreams. He's nervously confident that the dreams mean that he'll catch her, but he still has his own kind of lingering doubts about it. He leads a squad of dragoons up to Calhoun Mountain to say, okay, we're going to surround this place, and we want this girl, but Sarah and Calvin and Thalines are all well on their way, whereas Iron Andy Sr., who is an experienced dragoon and even lost an arm in the war fighting back in the late 1700s, he gets all of his buddies to surround Angleton and his soldiers and his dragoons and basically whip him and humiliate him and force him to give a sermon naked just to slow him up while Sarah goes on the run. So a bit of a comedic flexing in that chapter. Chapter 8, we go back to check on Bill. He's getting a taste of a speedy trial. He has a few remaining possessions stripped from him, and then he's shame-walked to a boat where the police will row him out to a prison hulk. It's a ship that's no longer seaworthy, and that's where they hide prisoners. As a cherry on top of all of his misery, he finds out that the warden of this prison hulk is none other than a man named Bayard Prideaux, who was a former comrade at arms with Bill back in the day under the service of Kyrese Eleutherius, but he stabbed the king in the back and is the cause of numerous woes that Bill has experienced since then. And he promises to make Bill's life in prison just complete hell. Meanwhile, Sarah and Thalines and Calvin are working their way to New Orleans to meet up with Bad Bill. Chapter 9, this chapter is bookended with Calvin fighting for his life against what turns out to be a fake, muddy homunculus of Sarah. This is some of the weird magic stuff that goes on. Angleton and Obadiah Dog's body, they're very crafty in their hunt for Sarah. They do get all the way to New Orleans. There are various other factions that are entering the fray here. Tarot cards, one of the dragoon riders uses tarot cards to try to track down Sarah and predict his odds of success in capturing her. Ley lines come into the fray. They use ley lines for tapping into magical power to try to increase their odds of success of getting away from Angleton, finding Bad Bill, finding the others. Bill, meanwhile, is able to survive prison and poverty for the most part, but he's struggling with the urge to kill Bayard Prideaux, the warden of this prison, which would just make his life infinitely worse. However, one very important person that he meets in prison is a Dutchman who pretends to be deaf and mute. His name is Jacob Hope. And he works for the warden, but there is much more going on to this man than you might suspect. On her journey, Sarah is also encountered by beast kind, the same kind of human-animal hybrids that rescued Bad Bill after his ordeal with the duel. And they give her some news that, again, complicates her mission and gives her questions about her identity. They offer her a powerful opportunity for an alliance, but that alliance would come through a marriage to their monarch, the Heron King. Sarah's 15, and ever since she found out that she's got this royal lineage on both sides, there's all sorts of nefarious figures, and even some virtuous ones that want to marry her for the powerful political connections that would net them. She does want their help, though, especially when it comes to finding her siblings, and they do seem to know where Bad Bill is, so she accepts their company en route to New Orleans without expressly saying, like, yeah, I'll marry this Heron King. Alliances are good, but she's not committing to anything just yet. Finally, Bad Bill, back on the prison barge, he catches a break. He's able to get some admissions out of Bayard Prideaux, and with those admissions, he's able to get some information that will benefit him if he can get back onto land. Bayard Prideaux pissed off some other people because, hey, that's what sneaky people do, and that's why he ended up with this job on the prison hulk. It's basically a prison sentence for him, the same way that it is for all of the inmates. Later, with Jacob Hope's assistance, Bill is able to write a letter to Emperor Penn as though it were from Bayard Prideaux, taunting him to provoke a response. It's a crafty way of maneuvering a political and social situation to orchestrate his escape eventually. Meanwhile, Sarah, Calvin, and Thalines get a ride on the Mississippi in a boat full of Germans. While experimenting with the magic of what's called second sight, Sarah detects that they are being followed by another boat that is 2 days behind them, and it's full of Lazars. These are necromantic thralls, once expelled from England by William Cromwell in the mid 1600s. Though nervous, Sarah finds comfort in Thalines' counsel and her silver-loaded weapons. She uses weapons of silver because these can help her deflect, magical evil and stuff. And the advanced warning helps her too. Nevertheless, she does have necromancers on her trail as she's trying to get down the Mississippi to New Orleans to find Bad Bill. Finally, in this chapter, we also meet a woman named Kinta Jane Embry. She handles duties on Bad Bill's prison ship. She ferries back and forth between the hulk and the shore. Jakob Hope gives her the letter that Bad Bill wrote and also passes her a coin with a plow and a sword on it. Kinta Jane recognizes that as the coin of the Heron King, and she's a student of the history inside this world, and she knows some of the magic of it. She knows it's an omen of a conflict to come, primarily spiritual in nature, and she's going to do something with that information in a moment. Sarah's party arrives in New Orleans. We're treated to some more of the fictional history for the city and world. This is a book, as you might be able to tell so far, that is not necessarily in a rush to get anywhere. The backdrop itself is a character that's worth studying slowly and enjoying and digesting, at pace. They check out some local monuments. They get a story about Andrew Jackson. Then they check in with a local bishop. They get a better lay of the land. And Sarah pays particular attention to the legend of a one-eyed queen to come. This is where I need to pause and emphasize where the title of the book comes from, Witchy Eye. Sarah and all of her siblings, because of their heritage and the way that the magic in it works, each of them has what might be considered to be a birth defect. Sarah has an infected kind of grody eye that's always leaking, and she can't really see out of it all that well. But she's soon able to understand that that's a magical eye. She can see magical things with it if she closes one or the other. Her brother has a similar affectation with his hearing, and their sister has a very curious development with her hair, which we'll get to that more in the third book. But along this journey, as she's learning the lore, she's also learning the limitations and the powers that this magical craft has. While they're working in New Orleans, fighting against the clock to find Bad Bill before the Lazars arrive, Sarah tries using her sight, but it won't work unless she has a personal item belonging to Bad Bill. But the Beast Kind, who have already met Lady Cathy, who's an ally of Bad Bill from New Orleans, they take Sarah to meet her. They make an acquaintance. Lady Cathy ends up joining their merry band of travelers, and ultimately they're able to add Bad Bill to the group. But in the conflict that ensues with the Lazars in the church in New Orleans, they lose Thalines. He dies in this conflict, and he's able to kind of use his own death to cover their escape in a heroic way, as mentors often do in stories like this. Chapter 19 is a massive, frantic combat chapter. This whole scene is Sarah and Bill's team trying to gain the upper hand over the Lazars with their silver weapons. It's an epic showdown. This continues on for a while. Like I said, Butler isn't in a rush to get anywhere. He makes the journey very enjoyable, and it's the rare kind of book that I still want to read these days, that is deep and large and wide and robust and everything in terms of its lore and the picture that it's painting, that rewards you on numerous readings going through it. I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that there's so much nonfiction tied to it, and I've become a greater appreciator of nonfiction in American history over the last several years. And so knowing that it's not just something that's made up, but that it's got a rich connection to our real world, I find that to be more appealing to my imagination and my sensibilities. So it's probably the key thing that makes this such an endearing book to me. Sarah learns different ways to use her magic to cover escape and stuff. And then finally, chapter 4, this was crazy. Chapter 24, excuse me. We get a death-defying escape in flying carriages that clear entire rivers using magic from ley lines. Guns fire, swords cross, lives are spent, heroes get away, though their next move is highly uncertain. And the events of the last few days have cost them a few allies. Obadiah Dogsbody dies securing Sarah's escape. Remember, he's loyal to Ezekiel Angleton, but he's got that charm on him that still makes him love Sarah. And now she has to figure out what her next move is. Exhausted from the night's heroics, in chapter 25, Sarah crashes the flying carriage in a field north of New Orleans. They bury Obadiah Dogsbody and remember him as a hero, despite him being a bit of a scoundrel for most of the story. Lady Cathy is able to translate the letter from Bayard Prideaux, who wrote it in French. It implicates Thomas Penn in the murder of Sarah's father, and it also has a cryptic clue as to the location of the regalia that Sarah needs in order to claim the throne of Cahokia. Team Sarah then saddles up and rides to the Ohio country to find that regalia, the royal gadgets that they need. During the voyage, Sarah is able to construct a magical decoy to throw her pursuers off her trail. Now Ezekiel Angleton is communing with an interesting interpretation of Oliver Cromwell, who reveals that his plan is to kill all the firstborn, which are beast kind, which are the forerunners to humanity through Adam, and then use their magical energy to end death for everybody else, to make everybody else immortal. Sarah has the potential to offer resistance to this plan, especially if she secures the Cahokian throne, which is what makes the Cahokian regalia significant. So Cromwell then charges Ezekiel Angleton with catching her before she's able to rally the rabble together. The last several chapters of this are a very action-packed phase of the book. The bulk of the word count is tied up in describing that action. Cool things are happening. As to that magical decoy that Sarah crafted for herself and of herself for Angleton and the Lazars to follow, it trips them up. Angleton and Berkeley find the decoy. Using logic, they don't immediately fall for it, but one of them does. He goes after it, and this springs a trap that drags him into the Mississippi and kills him. So she is able to get one of those necromancers off of her trail, just in time for her to arrive at the foothills of her late father's burial site. Captain Berkeley, he's the captain of the dragoons that are traveling with Angleton. He, again, uses his tarot cards to predict some things that are going to happen next. When they arrive in the foothills of Cahokia, they realize that they're in for a diplomatic exchange between themselves, the Cahokians, and those who are loyal to Emperor Thomas Penn in the Northeast. Angleton and Berkeley act as representatives of the Chevalier of New Orleans, who has his own power. Jacob Hope also returns, the so-called deaf-mute Dutchman who was on the boat with Bad Bill. He turns into a heron, and it turns out that he represents the beast kind. They are under the banner of Cahokia. The Heron King of Cahokia, like I said, wants a marriage alliance with Sarah, while the Chevalier of New Orleans wants her to rule from his city so that they can both oppose Emperor Penn. This is not a simple story of one empire fighting another. There are multiple power players on the board here, and they all want to secure and corral as much power for themselves as they can. And Sarah ends up, because, like I said, she's descended from two different lineages of this, she represents a significant portion of that power. And if they can secure that alliance to her, they can get a major advantage over everybody else. Sarah dons her father's regalia that she finds. There's a crown and a sword. The discussion, this diplomatic discussion, then escalates to a conflict that is embodied by two men performing a duel, which turns out to be Sir William Johnston Lee and Captain Berkeley of the Dragoons. Sir William wins this duel. He leaves Angleton shorthanded by taking Berkeley out of the fight. However, Berkeley, is under necromantic influence since they've been traveling with the Lazars this entire time. And the expert swordsman and duelist Sir William Johnston Lee is able to vanquish Captain Berkeley, leaving Angleton shorthanded, but it turns out Angleton is also under the influence of necromancy because he's been riding with necromancers this whole time, and they always have a backup plan. You can't really kill them, can you? And he starts to hear the influence of one of these Lazars, Robert Hooke, in his brain. Angleton then uses necromancy to revive Berkeley, so that win is immediately washed away. Jacob Hope, who is a physical manifestation of Simon Sword and Peter Plowshare, offers his marriage alliance again to Sarah, but she doesn't want it. She returns his sword to him and counter-offers that she wants the loyalty of the beast kind instead. The Heron King accepts this, although Sarah isn't sure whether he'll go back on that. She doesn't marry him. He says that he'll help her. She doesn't trust the ultimate result of that. Angleton uses the resurrected Berkeley and his dragoons to attack the mountain where they're all having this diplomatic discussion. Sir William Johnston Lee then rallies this beast-kind army to repel the attack. Angleton and Sarah's other enemies, they all cross swords or spells, and the whole thing becomes a chaotic, multi-directional brawl like Cahokia. Sarah's side gets a boost when she recovers her father's orb, another piece of his regalia, which channels the ley line magic in the Mississippi River, refills her stores, gives her a nice big boost there at the end. Unfortunately, her allies are falling to her enemies, and Angleton is rising up on a wave of growing necromantic power. Oh my goodness, let's go into the final chapter, see what happens. One of Sarah's allies, like I said, is Lady Kathy. She's a friend of Bill's from New Orleans. She's been indispensable on this journey, and she proves so once again as she stabs Angleton with a silver knife while he's in the middle of a spell. This cuts his magic and allows Sarah's forces to rally, overwhelming her enemies. Jacob Hope is also freed from magical possession by the Heron King, and his hearing and speech are restored fully to his own control. So it turns out he was just a guy who was infested with the spirit of the Heron King. He wasn't the Heron King himself, but in gratitude to his service, he is healed of his physical limitations. Sarah's allies then send the Chevalier and his representatives back to New Orleans with a new diplomatic arrangement in place for future conflicts. Angleton is injured but not dead. He flees to the north with the necromancer Oliver Cromwell whispering in his ear. Angleton realizes that his next best option is to go after Sarah's missing siblings and decides to start with her brother. So there's some sequel bait for you. Sir William and Lady Cathy confess their love for each other, but he's still got a family that he's married. He's married to a wife and everything back in Virginia. He can't be with her until he finally returns to his family and settles his affairs with them, including presumably the dissolution of his marriage, which one might think, because he hasn't even talked to his family in 20 years, is probably on the rocks, but who knows. William also takes Jacob Hope under his wing as a squire of sorts, and he teaches him how to be a soldier, so he's joined the squad now. Sarah embraces her queenship. She puts any discussion of a potential romance with Calvin on hold. He's been there this entire time. And she rallies her beast-kind troops for a northern expedition as a future conflict with Penn's forces becomes more and more certain. So Angleton is headed to the north to find her brother. She's got her beast army. She's going after him. She also wants to find her brother. And there we are. It took us 200,000 words. I skipped over and condensed a lot because this is already going to be a long video and I'm going to have to do a bunch of editing on it. But this is our Butlerian quest across a Tolkien-esque America laced with biblical mythos and lore. The plot is slow, the characters are colorful, the backstory is rich and deep, and the stakes are multifaceted. This book is challenging, unique, and it rewards multiple readings. I've gained a greater appreciation for titles like this that are hard to forget and beg you to come back to them. I'm pumped at the idea that I'll get to read it a few more times in my life, and I'm really excited to read Witchy Winter in 2026 and do a deep dive like this. I'm going to do the more detailed write-ups over on Substack, and I'll do a more polished summary video of it when it's all ended. But if you want to get even more into the details, or if as you're reading it you get a little bit lost about what's going on, I'm going to drop the links to those individual Substack articles that I wrote in the description of this video, and you can refer back to it. So just bookmark this video, do whatever you've got to do to get back to that information when you need it, and we'll go from there. If you've read Witchy Eye, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching this all the way through to the end. Check the description for links to my Substacks, and go buy this book on Amazon with my affiliate link, and I'll get a piece of that action. Anyway, thanks for watching. Drive safe. See you out there.